He built the gallows to kill a man who wouldn't bow, but he forgot to look up at the rope himself. He was second only to the king, rich, powerful, untouchable, until one sleepless night, one brave queen, and one forgotten scroll turned his empire of pride into a grave of disgrace. This is the story of Haman, the man who cast lots for someone else's death, only to fall by the hand of providence, the man who hanged on the very gallows he built for the righteous. Before you watch, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you're about to hear one of the most dramatic reversals in all of Scripture, a story of pride, purpose, and the unstoppable justice of God. The city of Susa shimmered beneath the Persian sun, its stone walls wide and white, its courtyards bursting with color, gold, and power. From its throne room ruled King Xerxes, the most powerful monarch of his time. He governed over 127 provinces, from India to Kush. With a flick of his scepter, empires rose or fell. And behind him, just over his shoulder, stood a man named Haman. Haman the Agagite, Haman the noble, Haman the climber. He wasn't born into royalty, but he carried himself like he had been. His robes were rich, his speech was smooth. His eyes were always watching, measuring others, calculating moves. He had mastered the art of flattery. He knew what to say and when to say it. And over time he rose like smoke, subtle, dark, and suffocating. Haman's rise to power wasn't loud. It was strategic. One by one, rivals were removed. One by one, favors were granted. And finally, the king appointed him as the highest official in the land, above all the princes. Only the king himself sat higher. A royal decree was issued throughout the provinces. All must bow before Haman when he passes, so the people obeyed. In the streets, in the palace, in the markets, every knee bent, every back bowed. Haman bathed in it. He didn't just want power, he craved worship. Every bow was a balm to his ego. Every salute, a confirmation of his greatness. But in the shadows of the palace gates, there stood a man who did not bend. He wore no crown, held no office. But his back was unyielding. His name was Mordecai, a Jew, a man of principle and prayer. Day after day as Haman passed by, Mordecai remained standing, eyes steady, head high. Not out of arrogance, but conviction. To Haman, it was unforgivable. At first, Haman tried to ignore it. One man, one dissenter. But pride is never satisfied with almost. The more people bowed, the more that one man haunted him. Why would Mordecai not bow? Haman investigated, and what he discovered only inflamed him more. Mordecai was a Jew, a people set apart, a people who worshipped one God and no man, a people who followed laws older than Persia. And so Haman, in his twisted logic, made a decision. If Mordecai won't bow, then none of his people deserve to live. This was no longer about one man. This was about annihilation. Haman walked into the king's court with confidence oozing from every step. He bowed, smiled, and began to speak like a trusted advisor. There is a certain people scattered among the provinces. They keep themselves separate. Their customs are different. They do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. Xerxes listened. He trusted Haman. There was no mention of Mordecai, no mention of Jews, just a vague threat dressed in elegant concern. And then Haman added one final touch. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will deposit 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury. The king gave him his signet ring, the symbol of imperial power. The decree was sealed. The death sentence was set. But Haman wasn't done. He wanted the date of destruction to be divinely timed. So he cast the pur, a lot, a dice, to choose the most favorable day. It fell on the 12th month, Adar, nearly a year away, long enough for him to plan every detail. Notices went out by royal courier, in every language to every province. On the 13th day of Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, shall be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. The people were stunned. Some questioned it. Most dared not speak. But Haman? He returned home that night to a feast prepared by his wife Zeresh. He smiled, toasted the stars, and leaned back in his chair with the smugness of a man who thought he had won. But in the heavens, God was stirring. In the courts of silence, a greater hand had begun to move. The man who cast lots had made a fatal mistake. He thought time was on his side. The ink was barely dry on the king's decree when fear began to ripple through the empire. In the marketplaces of Babylon, whispers filled the air. In the desert camps of Media, messengers read the edict in trembling tones. In the bustling streets of Jerusalem, people dropped their baskets, their faces going pale. In every city, in every province, the Jewish communities trembled. It was not just war, it was genocide, legalized by royal command. Fathers held their daughters tighter. Scribes wept over scrolls that might never be passed down. Rabbis taught with urgency, as if each lesson could be their last. And in the heart of the empire, just beyond the king's gate, Mordecai tore his robe. He covered himself with sackcloth and ashes. He cried with a loud and bitter cry. But he didn't weep in secret. Mordecai stood in the city square. The same man who had refused to bow now refused to be silent. People gathered, eyes watched, rumors spread. In every province, wherever the decree was read, there was mourning, fasting, weeping, and wailing. The people of God were in agony, and their time was running out. But there was one place the news had not reached, the palace. Inside the royal court, Queen Esther, crowned but cloaked in secrecy, lived in luxury yet knew little of the chaos outside her golden walls. She was a Jew, but no one knew, not even the king. She had hidden her identity as Mordecai instructed, for safety, for peace. But now that silence had become dangerous. Her maids came running one morning with wide eyes and worried voices. Mordecai is outside the king's gate, weeping, fasting, wearing sackcloth. He will not eat. He will not speak to anyone but you. Esther, alarmed, sent a servant named Hathach to find out what was happening. Mordecai handed Hathach a copy of the decree, sealed and deadly. He begged Esther to act. Go to the king, plead for your people, speak, now. Esther hesitated. Her heart thundered in her chest. No one may approach the king unless summoned, she replied. To enter without being called is death, unless he extends the golden scepter, and I have not been summoned in 30 days. She wanted to help, but she also wanted to live. Fear clouded her courage, and Mordecai's next words sliced through the veil. Do not think that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. If you remain silent at this time, deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Those words landed like a divine echo. For such a time as this, the moment, the calling, the reason for her crown. Esther bowed her head, trembling, but her voice steadied as she spoke to Hathach. Tell Mordecai, gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. I and my maids will do the same. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. The plot of darkness had met its first resistance. It was not from a warrior, not from a general, but from a young woman in royal robes prepared to risk everything for her people. While Haman celebrated in his house of pride, Esther was preparing in the secret place. While the gallows stood tall in his courtyard, prayers rose like incense from across the city. The fast began. The kingdom held its breath, and the woman God had positioned began to step into her purpose. The nights in Susa grew heavier as the days of fasting passed. 3 days, no food, no drink, only prayer, weeping, and the weight of what might be lost. In back alleys, in quiet homes, in temple courtyards, the Jews of the empire mourned. Children went hungry, not by choice, but by faith. Women cried out in hushed voices for deliverance. The elderly sat in silence, eyes fixed on heaven, and at the center of it all stood Esther, crowned, covered in prayer, no longer just a queen, a vessel of divine timing. On the third day she rose. She washed her face, dressed herself in her royal robes, gold and purple, threaded with dignity. She stepped to the mirror, not to admire her beauty, but to steel her resolve. Her hands trembled, her pulse raced, but her steps were steady. She crossed the marble halls of the palace, past whispering guards, past towering pillars, toward the one door every law said not to cross without invitation. Beyond it, the king. Beyond it, life or death. King Xerxes sat on his throne, robed in majesty, surrounded by scrolls and silence. He lifted his eyes, and his gaze landed on Esther standing alone in the entry. For a moment, time hung still. The court froze. Every eye turned to the king, and then he lifted the golden scepter. She was spared. She was received. She had found favor. Xerxes leaned forward, curious. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." But Esther did not beg. She did not expose Haman, not yet. She smiled softly and said, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come to a banquet I have prepared." The king agreed instantly. Haman was summoned. That night, in the soft glow of candles and sweet wine, Haman dined with royalty. He felt invincible. His enemies mourned. The city feared him. The queen herself had invited him, not once, but privately. As he walked home that evening, the stars twinkling above the palace towers, Haman's pride bloomed like a poisonous flower. But then he saw Mordecai, still at the gate, still unbent, still unbothered. And just like that, all of Haman's satisfaction curdled into rage. He stormed into his home. "Everything I have means nothing as long as that Jew Mordecai sits at the gate and refuses to honor me." His wife Zeresh and his friends responded with cruel confidence. "Build a gallows 75 feet high. In the morning, ask the king to hang Mordecai on it. Then go to the banquet and enjoy yourself." The suggestion pleased him. That night, under the cover of darkness, carpenters began to build. Wood split, ropes were tied. A tree of death was rising, not for a traitor, but for a man of faith. And the man who ordered it? He slept soundly, but the king did not. The moon had set, but King Xerxes lay awake. Sleep evaded him like a thief in the night. No music soothed him. No wine calmed him. Something stirred in his spirit, an unease without name. So he called for the royal records to be read aloud, the chronicles of the empire, dusty scrolls full of details only a sleepless king would bother to hear at such an hour. The servant unrolled a scroll, voice steady, eyes low, and then, a moment of divine timing. There was a plot to assassinate the king, discovered by Mordecai, who warned the palace guards. The assassins were caught and executed. Xerxes sat up. "Wait, Mordecai saved my life?" The servant nodded. "Yes, my lord. What honor or reward was given to him?" The servant hesitated, scanned the scroll. Nothing was done for him. The king's eyes narrowed. A loyal servant had saved his life and had been forgotten? Not anymore. At that moment, just as the sun rose, Haman entered the outer court, preparing to ask for Mordecai's death. Xerxes saw him and called, "Haman, come in. I have a question." Haman stepped forward, smiling. "Yes, my king? What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" And Haman, blinded by pride, thought to himself, "Who would the king delight to honor more than me?" He leaned in, his voice filled with drama. "For the man the king favors, let a royal robe be brought, one the king himself has worn. Let a horse the king has ridden be prepared, and place the king's crest on his head. Let one of the king's noble princes lead him through the city, proclaiming, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" Xerxes clapped. "Excellent. Go at once, take the robe and horse. Do just as you've said for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect a single detail." Haman's heart dropped like a stone. That morning, Haman, the man who built a gallows for Mordecai, led that same man through the streets in parade. He held the reins. He shouted the honor. This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. People stared, whispers flew, and Mordecai, he rode quietly, head held high, still unbowed, still faithful. It was a reversal no one saw coming, but heaven did. Haman returned home humiliated. He told Zeresh and his friends what had happened. Their faces went pale. The tone changed. If Mordecai is of Jewish descent, and you've begun to fall before him, you will not prevail. You will surely fall before him. Before Haman could process the warning, royal servants arrived. The queen's second banquet is ready. At the palace, Esther stood poised. The moment had come. The trap was closing. At the table, the king asked again, "What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted, even up to half the kingdom." She took a deep breath, eyes clear and bold. "If I have found favor in your eyes, and if it pleases the king, grant me my life and spare my people, for we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king's jaw tightened. Who is he? Where is the man who dared to do such a thing? Esther turned slowly. Her voice rang like thunder beneath silk. "This wicked Haman is our adversary and enemy." Silence fell. The blood drained from Haman's face. The king rose in fury and stormed out into the garden, his mind racing. Haman, left alone with Esther, fell at her couch begging for his life. But when Xerxes returned and saw Haman collapsed on the queen, his rage ignited fully. Will he even assault the queen while she is with me in the house? As those words left the king's mouth, the guards covered Haman's face. A eunuch spoke up. "There's a gallows, 75 feet high, built by Haman for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king." The king nodded without hesitation. "Hang him on it." Haman was dragged out in silence. The sun was setting, the same sun he had toasted beneath just days ago. The rope was tied. The gallows, built for Mordecai, now belonged to him. And Haman was hanged on the very thing his pride had built. The gallows stood silent. The man who once strutted through the palace halls, who demanded reverence and plotted annihilation, now swung in the wind. His name whispered in shame. His house, once brimming with pride, now shrouded in judgment. But the danger had not yet passed. Though Haman was dead, the decree he authored was still alive, sealed with the king's signet, unchangeable under Persian law. The death sentence hung like a sword over the Jewish people. The 13th day of Adar still loomed. Back in the palace, Esther fell at the king's feet once more, weeping, not for herself, but for her people. "Please, let an order be written to overrule the schemes of Haman, to save my people from destruction." The king extended the golden scepter again and lifted her. Then he turned to Mordecai, now clothed in royal robes, wearing the king's own signet ring, the very one Haman once held. Xerxes spoke. "You may write another decree, use my name, seal it with my ring. Do whatever you must to protect your people." Mordecai and the scribes worked through the night. On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, a new decree was written. Couriers flew across the provinces once more. The Jews may now gather and defend themselves. They may destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force that attacks them, and they may take plunder from their enemies. It was not vengeance, it was preservation. Fear shifted, hope returned. When the people of God received the new decree, they rejoiced. In every province, in every city, the sound of weeping turned to celebration. What was meant to be their day of extinction would now become their day of deliverance. Even non-Jews began to align themselves with them, for fear of the Jews had fallen on the empire. And Mordecai? He rose to second in rank, just beneath the king, from sackcloth to silk, from ashes to honor, from the gate to the palace. As the 12th month arrived, the day chosen by the Purim, the lots cast by Haman, the Jews assembled, ready to defend their lives. Across the empire, enemies rose, but they were met with unity and divine strength. The Jews prevailed. In Susa alone, hundreds fell before them. Esther requested the king allow an extra day in Susa to finish the work, not out of bloodlust, but to ensure that Haman's wicked influence was utterly rooted out. On the second day, Haman's 10 sons were also hanged on the same gallows, a symbol of the complete fall of his house. And then, it was over. The danger passed. The people lived, the curse reversed. Esther and Mordecai declared that the 14th and 15th days of Adar would be a time of joy, feasting, gift-giving, and generosity to the poor, to be remembered and celebrated in every generation. And thus, the festival of Purim was born. From the very word pur, the lots Haman cast to destroy them. What he meant for evil, God used for good. What was cast in pride was overturned by providence. The scrolls were sealed, the names were recorded, the legacy was secured, and Mordecai wrote to all the Jews, "These days should be remembered and observed in every generation." For on these days the Jews got relief from their enemies. Their sorrow turned into joy, and their mourning into celebration. The echoes of war faded. The swords were sheathed. The fear that once cloaked every Jewish home had lifted like fog before the morning sun. What remained was joy, not the kind born of revenge, but the kind birthed from rescue. A people marked for extinction had not only survived, they had triumphed. And the gallows, that towering beam, once built to hang a righteous man, now stood as a monument, not of death, but of divine reversal. In the royal courts, Mordecai stood next to King Xerxes, no longer a forgotten gatekeeper, but a man robed in blue and white linen, with a crown of gold upon his head. He walked through the city, and the people cheered. He spoke, and nations listened. But he did not lead with arrogance. He led with reverence, a man who knew what it meant to lose everything but still stand, to be hated but not bowed, to be raised up by God himself. And Queen Esther? She returned to her chambers not only as queen, but as a deliverer, a heroine who risked her life for her people and rewrote history with a voice trembling in obedience. Throughout Persia, the decree of Purim was sealed. Let these days be remembered and kept by every generation. Let them celebrate not just with feasts and gifts, but with joy, honor, and thanksgiving to God. From then on, every year on the 14th and 15th of Adar, Jewish families would gather around tables, not in silence, but in song. They would tell the story again, one of the wicked Haman who sought to destroy, one of the brave Esther who risked it all, and of Mordecai who refused to bow, and of the God who turned the decree of death into a festival of life. And what of Haman? His name was now a shadow. The one who built gallows was buried by them. The one who cast lots fell to the hand of providence. The one who hated was overtaken by holiness. His pride, once taller than his gallows, now lay in ruin. His estate was given to Esther. His story ended where all prideful hearts end, at the foot of a justice they cannot escape. The story of Haman is not just about politics, palaces, or ancient Persia. It's the story of how pride blinds, how hatred grows, and how God always keeps his promise. It's the story of a gallows meant to destroy a man of faith, but instead became a symbol of divine turnaround. And it's a story that whispers to every generation. You may be hidden like Esther, you may be unrecognized like Mordecai, but God sees, God knows, and God will act, because in the end, what was meant for evil, God uses for good. He plotted in secret, he bribed the throne, he raised the gallows, but God raised a queen, preserved a people, and rewrote the ending. Haman's name is remembered not in honor, but in warning. Mordecai's name is remembered not in whispers, but in celebration. And God, he is remembered as the one who never sleeps, never forgets, and never fails. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, soul-stirring Bible stories every week. And remember, what was meant for your downfall may just be the setup for your divine elevation.